This is a kind of follow-up to my video, The Labyrinth of Digressions and Qualifiers, but it's also a first stab at a video that I've wanted to make for some time and just haven't felt that I'm really up to. I'm going to try to make it quick, which probably means that it'll be about 20 minutes long. I have a real problem trying to talk about this because a bunch of ideas, how to put this, I absorbed a bunch of ideas a quarter century ago, and they have become so much a part of my sense of life, and I have talked about them so little that I find that when I do talk about them, people will just say, "What are you saying? What does that mean?" Because I can't instantly and intuitively bridge the gap between how other people see the world around them and how I see the world around me, except in the case of people who just happen to think like me. And I'm trying to speak to all the atheists who are making their presence known on the internet, because I feel like you're my people. And I feel like maybe you already know everything I know. Maybe you've gone through everything that I've gone through, or don't have to. And I'm really uncomfortable about trying to put anything forward that feels too much like trying to convert somebody to something, because I think that is a failed effort. People find their own way to wherever they are going to. That said, I'm going to try to cut back to the chase. I can feel myself digressing in my typical fashion. I just want, to all the atheists out there, the Christians, stop listening. You have your own hinky path to follow to wherever you're going to get. To the atheists out there, I would really like to recommend Alan Watts to you. Alan Watts was a philosopher and at one time an Anglican minister, Anglican priest, I guess they're priests, who either quit or got kicked out of the Anglican Church, and may have joined it in the first place to avoid serving in World War II. I'm not really I read his autobiography, but so long ago I can't quite remember all the intricate details. But he had a lifelong interest in Eastern philosophy, and ended up in the late 50s through the 60s and into the early 70s. He died in 73. He was a interpreter of Eastern philosophy, for a self-described interpreter of Eastern philosophy for Western man, as Western man manifested himself in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'd really like to talk more about Watts himself and what I think of him. But instead of doing that, I was going to try to read a few passages. He wrote many books, and I was trying to find something short enough to read, and I couldn't find anything that I really wanted to read of his in its totality that was short enough. So I'm going to actually try to read some semi-connected bits. This is a book of his, The Essential Alan Watts, which I'll talk more about in another vlog if I follow the plan that's in my head right now. But did I hold that up long enough? There's Alan in his last years. And this is Alan in an earlier period when he was apparently a writer for the Howdy Doody show. oh geez, I may cut this part out. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see here. Oops, wrong essay. This will be cut out. Yes, indeed, this will be cut out. I'm going to read his own self-description from one of his essays to try to kind of explain where he's coming from and why I'm trying to promote him. So then, if I ever get around to writing an autobiography, it will probably be called A Coincidence of Opposites, for I am not at all unhappy in having a somewhat inconsistent identity, as distinct from a rigidly patterned character. Furthermore, like St. Paul, I will be all things to all men, because, in the widest sense of the word, I try to talk to people in their own language. According to circumstance, I will play the part of intellectual professor, literary bohemian, college administrator, sober theologian, orientalish guru, philosophical entertainer, aging hippie, or even man of business. Philosophically, I will do my thing from almost any point of departure, any basic premises you might choose. Logical positivism, subjective idealism, scientific naturalism, critical realism, or pragmatism, psychoanalysis, behaviorism, or humanistic psychology, and theologically from the varying standpoints of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I like to use all these points of departure as views or approaches to the hub of a wheel from differing places on the rim. I try to explain each separate approach to the hub in such a way that it will be clear and unconfused, and that the reader will be able to understand the unity in terms of maximum diversity. It is the same with the art of life itself, for I agree with Shakespeare that all the world's a stage, and that one man in his life plays many parts. And who or what is that one? I will give you the Zen koan. When the many are reduced to the one, to what shall we reduce the one? And on that puzzling note, I'm going to jump around in some passages from his essay, The Drama of It All. If you were God and knew everything and were in control of everything, you would be bored to death. It would be like making love to a plastic woman. Everything would be completely predictable, completely known, completely clear, no mystery, no surprise whatever. Look at it another way. The object of our technology is to control the world, to have a super-electronic push-button universe where we can get anything we want, fulfill any desires simply by pushing a button. You're Aladdin with the lamp. You rub it. The genie comes and says, "Salam, I'm your humble servant. What do you wish?" Anything you want. And after a while, just as in those dreams I described to you, in the part I haven't read, you would decide one day to forget that you were dreaming. You would say to the genie of the lamp, "I would like a surprise." Or God, in the court of heaven, might turn to his vizier and say, "O commander of the faithful, we are bored." And the vizier of the court would reply, "O king, live forever. Surely out of the infinitude of your wisdom, you can discover some way of not being bored." And the king would reply, "O vizier, give us a surprise." That's the whole basis of the story of the Arabian Nights. Here was a very powerful sultan who was bored, and therefore he challenged Scheherazade to tell him a new story every night, so that the telling of the tales, getting involved in adventures, would never, never end. Isn't that the reason why we go to the theater, why we go to the movies? Because we want to get out of ourselves? We want a surprise. A surprise means that you have to other yourself. That is to say, there has to enter into your experience some element that is not under your control. So, if our technology were to succeed completely, and everything were to be under our control, we should eventually say, we need a new button. With all these control buttons, we always have to have a button labeled surprise. And just so it doesn't become too dangerous, we'll put a time limit on it. Surprise for 15 minutes, for an hour, for a day, for a month, a year, a lifetime. Then, in the end, when the surprise circuit is finished, we'll be back in control and we'll all know where we are. And we'll heave a sigh of relief, but after a while, we'll press the button labeled surprise once more. You will notice a curious rhythm to what I have been explaining, and this rhythm corresponds to the Hindu idea of the course of time and the way evolution works, an idea drastically different from ours. First of all, Hindus think of time as circular, as going round. Look at your watch, it goes round. But Westerners tend to think of time in a straight line, a one-way street, and we got that idea from Hebrew religion and from St. Augustine. There is a time of creation, then a course of history which leads up to a final eschatological catastrophe, the end of the world, and after that, the judgment, in which all things will be put to right, all questions answered, and justice dealt out to everyone according to his merits. And that'll be that. Thereafter, the universe will be, in a way, static. There will be the eternally saved and the eternally damned. Now, many people may not believe that today, and many people may, I add, but that has been a dominating belief throughout the course of Western history, and it has had a tremendously powerful influence on our culture. But the Hindus think of half of the world as going around and round for always in a rhythm. They calculate the rounds in periods, and I'm not going to read this part, which is just basically a long description of Hindu mythological existence, and it's not meant to sell you on it as some sort of literal belief, so it's not necessary to read it. And I jump forward. So, you see, this is a philosophy of the role of evil in life, which is rational and merciful. And if you want to hear what he's talking about, buy the book, man! But, to get back to his text, if we think God is playing with the world, has created it for his pleasure, and has created all these other beings, and they go through the most horrible torments, terminal cancer, children being burned with napalm, concentration camps, the Inquisition, the horrors that human beings go through, how is that possibly justifiable? We try by saying, well, some God must have created it. If a God didn't create it, there's nobody in charge, and there's no rationality to the whole thing. It's just a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It's a ridiculous system, and the only way out is suicide. But suppose it's the kind of thing I've described to you. Supposing it isn't that God is pleasing himself with all these victims, showing off his justice by either rewarding them or punishing them. Supposing it's quite different from that. Suppose that God is the one playing all the parts. That God is the child being burned to death with napalm. There is no victim except the victor. All the different roles which are being experienced, all the different feelings which are being felt by the one who originally decides, wills to go into that very situation. Curiously enough, there is something parallel to this in Christianity. There's a passage in St. Paul's epistle to the Philippians in which he says a very curious thing. Let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not think identity with God a thing to be clung to, but humbled himself and made himself of no reputation, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient to death, even the death of the cross. Here you have exactly the same idea, the idea of God becoming human, suffering all that human beings can suffer, even death. And St. Paul is saying, let this mind be in you. That is to say, let the same kind of consciousness be in you that was in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ knew he was God. Wake up and find out eventually who you really are. In our culture, of course, they'll say you're crazy, or you're blasphemous, and they'll either put you in jail or in the nut house, which is the same thing. But if you wake up in India and tell your friends and relations, my goodness, I've just discovered that I'm God, they'll laugh and say, Oh, congratulations, at last you found out. Now, I'm not sure that I believe that about India. And this is, for all I know, the wrong first taste for anyone who hasn't read Alan Watts. I just want to say, if you pay any attention at all to that, think about it in terms of how it might have meaning in a world where everything that science tells us is in fact true, and there are no supernatural alternatives to what science shows us. Think about how that story is true as a myth, and also ask yourself, what is a myth? I mean, if you're a atheist, you believe what science tells you, an empirical image of the real world. But what is that image? What is your belief? What is this thing that you value above everything else? What is a myth? What is your atheist understanding? It's 7:45 in the morning and I need to go to bed. But I just wanted to add one last thing. What I think of what I've just read to you. I am 99.999999% sure that there is no life after death, no survival of the personality after death. It doesn't mean I don't like to think about what it might mean if it were true, or make up stories about things that survive after death and things that come to us from the other side. But I don't remotely believe it. But if I were going to imagine a life after death that qualified as what Christians call the good news, I would imagine that when we die, we all wake up and discover we're the same person. Which, if you think about it deeply and openly enough, is actually what Christianity teaches. That's for you Christians who are still actually listening and didn't go away like I told you to.